Welcome to My Career Journey, a podcast that highlights different career paths, tackles tough topics, and shares actionable tips and insights. I'm Emily.
And I'm Allegra. We're your hosts and both career switchers. In each episode, we'll talk about our experiences, learn from others, and help you find happiness and success in your career journey. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful people. We are so glad that you chose to spend a few minutes with us today.
Today's episode is a deep dive where we focus on a specific topic that people approach differently. And today's topic is giving and receiving feedback.
Oh, buddy. Okay. I think people can probably already guess why we chose this topic. And some people just hearing that might have clenched a little bit and the heart rate gone up because this topic is fascinating. It can be emotional. There are so many ways it can go wrong, but also when it goes right, it is so powerful. Every industry, organization, person has a little bit of a different culture and approach to it. And so we're going to share a few things that bubbled to the top for us. And as always, we invite you to help us get the conversation started and think about what it means for you, what you've learned, and hopefully make it easier for someone else to feel confident as they ask for and receive feedback and give feedback, all those things.
So now it's time for Did You Know, where we share interesting facts we found while researching this topic.
Woo-hoo.
So do you want to start, Allegra, since you have two?
I do.
I only have one today.
I couldn't edit myself. Okay, so first, etymology of the word feedback, or at least the origin, right? The verb feedback goes back to mechanical processes and electrical circuit stuff, like as early as the 1860s, right? So who knew that? The first time it was used as a noun was by Nobel laureate in 1909. Referring to, again, coupling between components of an electric circuit. So it's funny to think about like how far this word has come in terms of how we use it today, right?
That's so interesting. It's so weird to like make that connection.
Yeah. Electric circuit, kind of. It's like coming back and forth. I
right.
don't know.
I guess that makes sense. So my fact is that research shows when people receive feedback, even when you're given positive feedback, your brain often gets that same fight or flight response as you do when you're facing a physical threat. So that tracks to, I guess, why people get so defensive so quickly when you're given feedback. And yeah, I just thought that was really fascinating.
Well, it makes sense, right? Because you're hearing something that could threaten your perception of reality, and that's scary.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess you have to prepare yourself to receive bad feedback, even if you're not going to. But if you ask, you have to be prepared.
Yep. Okay. Building off of what you just said, I found that, I forget what poll this was in. It was in a Forbes article. We'll have to link to it. But after assessing more than 5,000 people, it was found that 12% of the population has a high level of fear, as you said, about feedback, but 12% of the 5,000 people. And this was interesting too. Females were slightly higher inclined to be more fearful at 14% versus males at 10%. And as people moved to higher levels in the organization, there was a correlation of lowering fear.
Oh, interesting. I guess that makes sense.
I mean, I guess you think about people being higher up, I don't know. I was going to say
power and influence. So I guess it's
harder to touch, harder to like have it actually mean something. I don't know. Yeah. Fewer people kind of proportionately that can actually fire them or have some kind of governing decision based on that.
And they're probably
feedback.
not doing like the day-to-day work necessarily. So maybe it's more like they're working on high level stuff and it's not as easy to I guess scope. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just making stuff up.
I know, right? Well, even like 12% of the population has a high level of fear. Like how do you define a high level of fear?
Yeah, that's
how much of a fight or flight response do you need in order to
seems like a gray area with feedback.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right, should we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it. So how important has feedback been throughout your career?
I mean, really important, really freaking important, right? I think feedback is growth in a lot of ways. And not only like learning how to ask for it is so important. That I think teaches us a lot about how we interact with people, but also helping alert to some blind spots, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's been really fundamental. I think also you and I, having come from the classical music world, we've seen a lot of times it's you have an individual teacher, you have peers, and you don't get better by just practicing alone. You have people that are outside of your head telling you what you can't necessarily hear.
Exactly. For both music and tech, it can lead to new insights and
Yep.
ideas. Pretty much what you said. It broadens my worldview because I'm learning from different people with different perspectives that come from different backgrounds. And it also helps me keep an open mind.
Yeah. The other thing too, like we're both career shifters, and I think for people that are career shifters, you need feedback to kind of help orient you within your new environment. That idea of imposter
Yeah.
syndrome, when you get something that is either validating you're on the right track or telling you something you didn't know that could inform you about fit, alignment, that kind of stuff is really helpful early on.
Oh, of course. Yeah. In a sense, even if you're not getting like outside feedback, even just observing a new culture, a new place, the way people interact, it tells you a lot
Yeah.
and you can learn so much from that.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. So, okay, we talked about kind of like importance overall. What has the impact been? I wonder if we break down like different situations, industries, how we've seen it throughout your career. What has the
mhm.
impact of the feedback been?
So as a violinist, feedback helped me take my playing to new levels
Mm,
and help me become a better musician. And also, in some cases, it led to new opportunities and gigs because I would ask to play for people that I didn't know or that, you know, were playing in specific places that I wanted to play in. So that would open the doors to new opportunities. So that was cool. And then in tech, it's helped me become a better designer and colleague, but also feedback is tied to good performance reviews. So
oh, yeah.
that contributes to salary raises and promotions. And I hate that it's tied to that, but it is an impact. So,
It's a reality, right? Yeah.
yep. How about you?
No, similarly, and I think when I go back to those days of being a professional cellist, I think there's a kind of character that's developed with being like feedback being so normalized
Hmm.
because when you are getting feedback, often it's blunt, right?
Right.
And
Oh, yeah.
some yes, but when it becomes normalized, you're kind of expected to get some kind of critique constantly. And
Right.
I think that kind of makes you Teflon in some ways. We've talked
Oh,
about some of the
yes.
negative impacts of that too.
Hmm.
But there's humility and a growth mindset that's also cultivated from that, that I found to be really helpful in consulting. I think people in consulting, I've had bosses, people leaders who are like, oh, wow, like you do a really good job of collecting feedback. And I think it goes back to the classical music stuff where it was just, you're always asking for feedback, whether it's a master class, whether it's an
Right.
audition, right? We're trained to
Hmm.
do that. Um, and then I've seen feedback be less of a driver in places like higher education, where I would get
Mm.
once a year, I would have a performance review with the dean or whoever. And it felt a lot more kind of compulsory than actually constructive.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah,
That's when it gets kind of when there aren't specific goals around the feedback or when it's not tied to something in particular, I think it's hard to kind of take it's hard to take action from that and
yeah,
learn.
right.
So,
Like really meaningful feedback is different than check the box feedback, right?
right. Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but like you said, in consulting, like feedback from peers and clients is the defining aspect of both my individual growth of sharpening my own set of tools and how I show up, but also how I advance at the company.
In terms of the culture of feedback, we kind of touched a little bit on it, but how was it different for you with music and now being in tech?
I think about the origin of like the feedback in classical music. There's a lot more of an air that you're competing with one another without necessarily as much to gain from one another, which I also think is not true, right? You think about freelancing and gigging, like you can give other people your
Right.
gigs, it is relational.
Right.
So I think as a result, the feedback was much more blunt and direct, honestly. There was also a high level of subject matter expertise that everybody had.
Right.
And in corporate settings, I'd be curious if you found this at the companies you've worked for, but I think there's more filtering because there's a reliance on each other to give each other feedback. And so even though the constructive feedback and some of those tough conversations are what help each other grows most, I think often there's more filtering because you don't know how they're going to react and you don't know if they take it badly. Does that mean they're not going to give you the feedback you need later, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think with tech, I've had to be a little bit more careful with how I frame things.
Hmm.
But I think when we're working towards a common goal, the feedback, when we give feedback, it's more of like, how can we explore all of the options to get to the best result? So I
So
think
like a
it's
collective,
definitely,
like a shared project feedback.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
For that at least. But in terms of like individual development and all that stuff, I think people do tone it back a little bit just because it's going to managers, it's going to other
Yep.
people. So
You know what? And you
yeah.
just kind of unlocked a different perspective of this. And I was coming into this really thinking about individual feedback, but
Yeah.
there's so much to be said about communal feedback. If you think about retrospectives, like that's
Hmm.
obviously such a huge thing in the tech world and agile spaces. I love those. I wish every organization did that, whether or not you're in software development or not, or product
Right.
development. But
And
that is a different thing.
right. And for those that don't know, retros are uh, times when you meet to just reflect on what went well, what didn't, what you could do better.
As a
And
team.
just as it, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting in tech, in my experience at least, you have meetings where you do like design reviews or stuff like that, or you have the performance reviews with your manager.
Yep.
But you mostly ask for feedback. And in the music world, you're put in these spaces like you talked about, especially in school or in summer festivals, where you're expected to give and receive feedback publicly. For people that don't know, like when you're studying with a specific teacher, in music, you have something called like a studio class, which is where you play in front of all the other students that are studying with your teacher. And then you give each other feedback on your playing. And then you also have public master classes, which
Yep.
were less frequent, but you could have them up to like 3 to 4 times a year, where a renowned musician comes and you play in front of them and they give you feedback in front of a large audience. And this could be in front of hundreds of people.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's intense.
Although I think that is one of the spaces, those especially the studio class, where everybody there is learning from the same teacher. But shout out to my
Right.
professor Emilio Colon. He always had us. He would call on people, so everybody was practicing giving feedback in addition to playing. But all right, say something that you appreciated. Say something that you think could have gone better that they should think about. Yeah, it wasn't exactly like that, but it was basically constructive and positive feedback and
Mhm.
practicing us saying both sides of that. And
Yeah.
from college, that was just expected of us to give to our peers. But it's very different when you're explicitly asking for it in a corporate world versus being expected it's going to come to you at all points everywhere in the music world.
Yeah. And you have it really, like you said before, it just contributes to a really tough mindset and you have to be able to take it and process it. And I think we'll talk about that in a second.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think like when it is that shared responsibility, there is something that is healthy about that too, when everyone sees it as like we're growing together. But if it
Mhm.
just shows up when it's like, that kind of compulsory whatever, it's not really like in the culture, it's just compliance. And that's not really like, I don't know, it's not
Yeah.
great.
So how do you usually ask for feedback?
It's a good question. I think you have to think about like the purpose and who you're asking feedback from, right? Like we're talking
Mhm.
about with performance reviews, then you have to think about how is it going to be appreciated by the company, right? Not just how you're going to use it, but how is the company going to use it and how will they acknowledge that this is legitimate feedback? But if it's just for you personally, there's a lot more options, especially if you have somebody like an executive or a busy leader, and it's hard to get time with them, just like meet them where they are and make it as easy as possible for you to
Yeah.
just, right? And
Mhm.
then I think there's also the right kind of questions. But yeah, what would you add in terms of how to ask feedback in a way that you can get meaningful content and engagement?
I think you have to do it at a time that's relevant to when you're working with the person.
Yes.
It's really important that they have the work fresh in their mind. Um, And also just being specific about what you want feedback on is another big thing that I found very helpful.
Yep, exactly. And especially if it is something where I think the interpersonal dynamic of this is interesting too, because sometimes the desire for feedback is not, again, that performance or necessarily your own growth, but identifying that there's something where you're not working with a teammate well, and what can you do? Like, what can I do differently here? I'm sensing this. There's a model of teaming that was created by Bruce Tuckman called the Tuckman model, is just what it's called after his name. But the idea of the arc of this teaming, it's kind of cyclical, but it can be any stage. It's forming, storming, norming, and performing, and then sometimes adjourning if they're wrapping up. But if you think about feedback's role in helping team development, like we were talking about retrospectives, it also helps through this storming phase where inevitably interpersonal dynamics, communication, tension can be worked through, and feedback can be such a huge part of that if you're bold enough to stand up and say, you know what, that way you led that meeting didn't resonate with me or the team, and here's why. And reinforcing positive stuff that keeps you moving forward, but it's all connected.
Right. Yeah. So how do you ask the right questions to give you the feedback that you need?
I think I've gotten better at this as I've gotten more developed. I don't know about you. Do you have like a set of questions that are your go-to, or do you individualize it based on every circumstance?
It actually depends on what I am focusing on, I guess, in terms of and what project and a few other factors. But mostly I ask for feedback on the work that I'm doing and my communication and collaboration. And if there's anything else I can do differently to be a better colleague.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, in that way, the kind of standard retro questions, what did I do well? What could I have done differently? What actions would you represent moving forward? Those are good, like kind of fallback questions if you're just really stuck and you need to ask something, right?
Yeah.
But I think in general, vague questions get vague responses.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. So I think if you do want to ask for specific feedback, you have to pick out a specific area or topic you want feedback on, and then clearly communicate that. Like, I'm working on leadership skills. Can you share, like, I would love to know how I'm doing with that, if there's anything I can do differently to become a better leader, or just pick something specific.
Yes, exactly. If I'm a change manager and I led some kind of workshop specifically focused on a change canvas, for example, I would want to ask someone who, one, knew about that kind of content, and then two, was primed in advance with my kind of goals so that they could observe those things too and help me with that. And I think that's the other thing is, like, your questions should depend and be fair to the person you're asking the questions of. Like, think about them and what can they actually give you feedback on that's going to be within their wheelhouse and useful for you, and tailor the questions accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you deal with needing to map any feedback to company goals?
I mean, like you said, you have to know kind of what you're going for and what's being asked of you from your company. I have kind of that template where I think about if it's competencies, where I can kind of map feedback I get from people who I know are in a position to get that. I kind of chart it out, like both mentally and within like an Excel spreadsheet or a Word doc. Do you do that too?
Yeah,
I see you nodding.
I do that too. Yes. Yeah. I have a whole spreadsheet. Yeah. I have a whole space where I have feedback where it's mapped to specific categories. And actually at my last job, we needed to demonstrate proficiency in categories like craft, communication, collaboration, stakeholder management, leadership. So my colleagues and I would actually let each other know like what categories we needed feedback on, or like what we wanted more feedback on, and we would give feedback specifically around those categories, so we would have that what we needed to which is probably cheating the system a little bit, but it's it's
working the system. I don't know, but like here's the thing, so many people, and you see it at like the time of performance reviews where you get a flood for ask of feedback, and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to help all these people, but one, they didn't give me enough time to think about when I was working with them where I saw these things. And two,
Mhm.
then everybody is being asked for feedback at the same time, and you're
It's
not going to get the same level of detail that you would if you incorporated
exactly.
it into an ongoing practice.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely do it as you go, as much as you can.
Yes, for the
Um,
sake of you and the other person.
yeah, and if you're all, it's also hard to get because when I was working at the agency, I was working at uh like through a large corporation through my agency, but they weren't able to give me feedback through their platform. So I had to ask people individually for it. So if
Yeah.
you're in a position like that, just make sure you're connecting and communicating with the people you're working with. Hey, I would love to get feedback to share with my manager or something if they can't provide it directly through the company you're working for. Or also, it's good to have just for your own self and for
Yes.
your benefit. Like if you want to show people what people have said about your work, if you run your own agency or something, or you're freelancing.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. No, and going through the right channels, sometimes you can't be the person that directly asks for that feedback, but if you let the other people know, like you said, more often
Right.
than not, they'll find a way to do that for you. And like you said, the personal side of it, I think it just pause on if you are going through imposter syndrome or you had a rough day, something that I've done is have kind of like I have like a brag folder, like a positive vibes document, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
where people have talked about my subject matter expertise or how I've made an impact. And those sometimes you need to refer to those things when your head's in a dark place to just remember like people appreciate what you offer. You are enough, you are good enough. And
Yeah.
just leaning into your areas of strength when you have moments of doubt can also be really powerful as a result of feedback.
Yeah, and also what's helped me too is documenting as I go. Like if someone mentions something I did in a chat, or if someone comments
Yes.
on something I did just without asking, just document that and keep it for your records in case you need it or in case you want to have it just for yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Practicing these habits
um,
can be so powerful. Every step of the way, the chats, the
yeah.
meetings, the formal requests, all of it. It
Yeah.
can all be really helpful.
So when do you ask feedback versus when not to ask feedback?
Well, not surprisingly, timing matters, right? And I think reading the room, but asking when it's fresh, right? There's a reason that
Mhm.
retros are done like in the middle of a sprint cycle or development. It's like every 2 weeks when people are still in the middle of things or just finished. Um, Ask when it's fresh, when the person you're asking feedback from, has directly observed your work and recently done so. And like we said, don't wait till the last minute for a performance review or things like that.
Yeah.
How about you? Any other tips on when to ask for feedback, what the best times are?
Actually, yes. If you're asking for feedback like on a personal level, not tied to like promote to work stuff or
Yeah.
promotion stuff, ask when you feel like you have the mental and emotional bandwidth and capacity to
Ooh.
receive and process other people's emotions and
Yes,
opinions. Sorry,
true.
not
True.
opinions. Yeah.
Yes.
And then don't ask if you're not in the mood, don't want to deal with other people's thoughts, or don't feel like you can handle it if you receive negative or constructive feedback.
It's so true. No one needs to be like in that already in that fight or flight or emotional situation. You're only going to be reactive when they hear, which isn't going to feel good um, for anybody.
And yeah, exactly. And then it's not worth it to you because then you're not going to want to listen to it. You're not going to want to process it. And it's going to be hard to tie it, to take a step back and not take it personally.
Yeah, and actually, like, because giving feedback, as we said, is kind of a relational risk.
Hmm.
It's very vulnerable for the person giving feedback often, if they've
Yeah.
really thought about it, as it is for the person receiving it. And so I think acknowledging that is so important with the timing. Is how would this person feel about like and giving them the space to share it when, but also making sure you're doing your part and giving them the kind of acknowledgement that you are ready to receive the feedback, like Emily said. Absolutely.
Yeah. So once you get feedback, what do you do with it?
Not all feedback is created equal, right? And so,
Agreed.
but I think if you're a people pleaser, and especially if you're working through that imposter syndrome, it can be tempting to react to and listen to all that feedback. And I just want to tell you pause, think about
Hmm.
it, right? Um, and filtering can be good. Don't do it in a self serving way, but think about, okay, Does this align to where I want to go? Is anything surprising? If I'm getting an emotional reaction, why? And just kind of be curious about that.
Yeah.
And then kind of note what that means for you. But I would say, yeah, first thing I do is kind of pause. And then also you want to say thank you pretty soon. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I try not to react right
yes,
away. I take time to process it, and then figure out if it's worth applying to whatever I'm trying to do.
yep.
And then if I do, I try to implement it. But yeah, that initial reaction, I need time to just take it into consideration before doing anything.
Yeah, and I think especially like we've talked about having live feedback for things that might require a little more nuance or conversation, or the tougher things. Like
Right.
I'm not usually going to share tough feedback that is more of that constructive things that I've noticed areas of improvement without sharing it in a one-on-one live person first, right?
Right, right, right.
So
Mhm.
in that, if you're in that live conversation, and even if you're not, you have the opportunity to ask those clarifying questions so that you can really
Mm.
seek to understand. Like if they say, you seemed nervous in this meeting and rushed through this passage, and say, okay, what was the impact? What recommendations would you have? If you have like, anything that can further help you and you think they might be amenable to digging into it a little bit, there's an opportunity
Right.
there too.
It depends on their personality too. Like people can take feedback differently. So just make your best judgment call, but just be sure they're in a place to receive it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
such a good call. Everything we're saying is highly dependent on situation, culture, and individual.
Yes. Yeah.
Very much so.
And
Um, but just coming back to that like thank you component, I think there's some things like if you get feedback that's tough for you to hear, or maybe
mhm.
someone like, I think I heard something recently that was like separate the data from the delivery, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Which
Oh,
I
yeah.
find so helpful because, you can say like, I appreciate you being direct. I mean, someone was super blunt and you were like, whoa, kind of hurt my feelings,
Right.
but thank you for sharing that with me. And
Yeah.
then consider this longer term approach, the relationship and the psychological safety you're creating through gratitude and through the trust of extending and receiving feedback with them.
Mhm.
Something to think about as you go on, regardless of just this one time interaction of feedback.
Right, right. And you also wanna make the person feel like they've helped you. So
Yes.
it's like, yeah, thank you. I'm gonna take this into consideration. I'll do my best to work it in, or whatever, however you wanna respond. But
Yep.
just say like, I am gonna take what you said and think about it. And I mean, whether you implement it, that's a different story. But
Yeah. Yeah. Different conversation.
at least you're acknowledging them and taking what they're offering. So
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely.
How do you keep from taking things personally?
Do I do a good job of this? Always no. There was a recent situation where we asked some like survey registration questions for a course that I'm delivering, and
Uh-huh.
one of the is like anything else we should know, and the comment was, "I did not find these sessions useful."
No.
And here's the thing, like I was like, wow, and that it wasn't the dominant response, it was an outlier, but even if those outlier feedback things come in, they
That's
can
what you
still
focus on.
sting, right? Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so I was like, okay. And then I reflected and was like, okay, you know what? This isn't about me personally. This is about this individual's relationship with the course content at that moment in time. And that's
Right.
okay. And so I think separating your value as a human with the content or the work that you're doing is
Yeah.
important, and putting it into
Oh,
perspective.
absolutely. Yeah, taking that space and thinking about the feedback as information, like you said with the data.
Data versus
I
delivery, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just more information that you can use if you choose to use it.
And if you aren't sure that this is reliable data, ask someone you trust to help give additional context. Or at the very least, explore if you're having an emotional reaction, like we talked about, why? What
Mhm.
value is
Yeah,
that telling you about? What do you need to think about there?
right.
Because that's valuable information too.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And when should you take something personally?
I think that's a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I I think if feedback is pointing to interpersonal context or harm or something that is like you hurt somebody and they're emotionally upset about it, or there's something that is an infringement upon your values that you did, like not just technical, it is truly about who you are and what you did. Take it personally and think about your role in that. um, and and be curious and follow up. I don't know, it's a hard question to answer. What do you think?
For me, it's if someone, yeah, kind of like what you were saying, if someone criticizes you as a person, like
Yeah.
your character, your intelligence, or whatever, that's when you need to take things personally. But if they're giving you feedback on the actions that you take or
Yep.
the work that you've done, they're probably just trying to help, but maybe not framing it in the best way.
Right.
So I think just try to get to the root of where the feedback's coming from, what they're actually trying to say. But yeah, if it does get to that personal level, then something's off. Something has to be escalated.
And worth a little more investigation. But I don't know, the separation of emotional investment with feedback, personal or professional, it can all kind of get lumped in the same spot. It's so
I
tricky.
know it's yeah. How do you navigate conflicting feedback?
Mm. I think curiosity and then validation with people I trust. And
Mm,
I mean, a lot of these situations that we're in, right? We're there. We know what happened. We have that kind of gut sense of, although we have our blind spots. But more often than not, the feedback is more kind of minor things rather than surprising revelations. But I
yeah.
think if you're truly, there's conflicting feedback, and you're like, "Who I need to dig into this." One, that's already telling you something because the way that you're doing something is being perceived differently by different people, and why.
Mhm.
Two, maybe you need to ask follow-up questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would happen to me all the time as a musician. And I guess art is a
That's
little bit more.
true. Yes.
Yeah, I would have teachers telling me different things all the time. But I think you just have to gather all of the feedback and pick what you want to take. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least you
Yep.
tried. And then you
Right.
could use the other feedback.
And even like, oh, I love that you brought up that situation because you could have two different teachers who approach Tchaikovsky, let's say, totally differently, right?
Mhm.
Then you have to come up with your own interpretation of how do I want to play this
Yeah,
Tchaikovsky piece versus what these two people are telling me I should and perceiving it. It's like
right.
that is a stylistic choice that you have artistic ownership over how to make that choice.
Mhm. Yeah,
When you're working with a team or somebody else, then you have to think about who has influence and who
exactly.
has the competence and subject matter kind of expertise that you want to aspire to be or that you respect. And then that has a different kind of thing than Tchaikovsky interpretations. But
Yeah. And yeah, and actually when that does happen at work, because that did happen to me on a project. Like we had so many hands and feedback on
mm,
something that I was working on, and I just couldn't incorporate everyone's suggestions into
yeah,
the design. So what I did was just say, I had to make this decision because of these reasons. And we can take this into consideration for future iterations or, um, I love the idea, but right now this person or someone wants to go this direction and that's where it landed. And yeah, try to take yourself maybe out of the decision.
yeah. Emily, I think you're pointing to a good, this is more of like an organizational issue that I see, but a lot of times organizations will ask for feedback from their people and not intend to do anything with it or not have the capacity to do the analysis of the feedback. And so
Mhm.
then it's an empty invitation. And I think in the same way that if you're asking someone for their feedback and you're continuing to work with them, you need to do your part by saying, I am asking in like good faith that they will share something and in good faith that I will actually try and apply what they share. Otherwise, you're
Mhm.
breaking trust in the same way that an organization that invites a survey, they never do anything with the responses to. If you
Right.
never do anything with something that your colleague shared, it's the same issue. And that is breaking trust, that is breaking respect and undermining your actual intentions of growth.
Yeah. So, what frameworks do you actually use when you give feedback?
I like the retro one. And you think of like Franklin Covey talks about like purpose and positive intent and difficult conversations and making sure you're balancing those. And I think that's really important to always have constructive and positive and opportunity for action. So that kind
Mhm.
of SBI framework, situation, behavior, impact, can get to kind of how you tell the stories within that kind of construct, but that's the one I've seen most used and I think is the most concise. That situation. What did they do? Behavior, like how did you see them act and then impact? What difference did it make that you saw? What do you think? What's your construct or frameworks that you think about for feedback?
So when I'm giving positive feedback, I just, share what I liked and be like, I'm very specific about
Yep.
what was good, and what made it stand out, or what
When it
I,
happened, where it was, all
yeah.
that. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
But when I'm giving constructive feedback, I try to frame it as positively as possible. So I always start with the positive feedback, like what I just said. I loved this about what you did, or and then when I have something constructive, I try to frame it as like, have you considered trying this? Or I think doing this would take it to the next level. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or I wonder what would happen if you did this. Just something to think about. Can take it or leave it. And then you end with the positive. And
Yes.
you say, I think this is, you're an amazing colleague, or this is going in a great direction if I'm giving feedback on the work or whatever. And I really enjoy collaborating with you, or, something that they can end on a positive note with.
Yep. And ideally, as we said, people will have given you a heads up on specifics they're looking for so that if
Right.
you're working with them, I have in like my little OneNote, often I'll have different tabs for different teammates where I can
Mm-hmm.
document some of those stories so that they
Mm-hmm.
ask and I have all the things and I don't have to think about, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm context switching from facilitating this meeting to give you feedback. Okay. It's
Right.
like it's all there.
It takes
Um,
time to give feedback and to give
it
thoughtful
does.
feedback.
It
And
does.
it just shows, I guess, respect when you receive feedback, meaningful feedback from people.
Yep, absolutely. And I think if you're in a live conversation and you are perceiving this way a person has acted and you want to tell them, sometimes I start with a question, be like, how do you feel about this? And it's a leading question,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives
Mm-hmm.
them the opportunity to share a little context for me that might help me frame what I'm about to share.
Mm.
Like if I know someone tends to overtalk and I want to talk to them about it.
Mm-hmm.
Saying, how do you feel the balance of voices in our meeting is? And then maybe they
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, I get really nervous. Sometimes I feel like I talk too much and be like, yep, you know what? I think I've seen that. And I wonder how we
Mm-hmm.
can talk through that together and raise different voices of the
Yeah.
team so everyone's heard. It can kind of open up a little more humanity before just saying like, here's what I
Right.
have to say.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think you just have to create that connection with them and be empathetic, be understanding, because you never know what's going on with someone. And you just want to
Yes.
make sure you're approaching it with an open mind and giving them space to kind of be able to share their side.
Yes, empathy, clarity, such powerful tools for positive interactions with feedback.
Do you have any other final advice or thoughts?
As we're talking about this, I think it's important to build a practice of feedback. Once you start going and you figure out what works for you, you're clear about your goals, is this practice helps you enlist a team of people who are more consciously looking out for you too. And there's something
Yeah.
really beautiful about that. So I think the growth mindset aspect of feedback is so powerful. If you don't already have it, just encourage you to start somewhere.
Yeah.
What do you think? What did we miss? What's top of your mind?
I think just reiterating kind of what we already talked about is that observation is a very powerful form of feedback.
Mm,
And especially when learning about people's individual communication styles. So it's something you can use before you even communicate with them, or just take in how they react, their reactions, actions, responses to things. That can tell you a lot about how they will take feedback. So,
that's so true. That's a whole kettle of fish we really didn't even get into in terms of
yeah.
communication styles, Emily. Oh my
Oh, that's another
gosh.
deep dive. We can do that in another deep dive. We
Should we
should.
do that, people? Communication styles? Taking uh,
Ooh, yeah, I might have some hot takes.
hot takes coming in from Sweden, everybody. I think we've covered our top points for this deep dive, although there's always so much more.
Oh, I
Uh,
know.
everyone, please chime in where you've seen feedback be a powerful tool, what you've learned about what works for you, and any advice you'd have for people starting their journey of incorporating a more feedback-forward practice.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will have more episodes soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. My Career Journey is produced by Emily Banzhaf and Allegra Montanari. If you enjoy our content, follow us wherever you get your podcasts and find us on YouTube and Instagram at My Career Journey Pod. Thanks for listening.